0 point energy. So that right there would pull energy from the ether. Here we are.
Showing you scenes of them building mud bricks, like large mud bricks. You see them gathering material here, clay. They're firing it. You see the fire up here. They're forming these mud bricks. They're carrying the mud bricks. This is all very sort of primitive methodology with their tools. And then if you follow it all the way over to here, what they're doing with it, they're making either mud brick ramps or they're making mud brick pyramids potentially. I mean, likely not, this is probably a mud brick ramp. We know they use ramps in the temples to get up high. In fact, in Karnak temple, there's still remnants of mud brick ramps, and we'll see that tomorrow. But looking up further, you can see scenes of woodworking. They're using saws, they're using a bow drill here into wood. You see little rock hammers and things like that. You see them here shaping the alabaster stone vases. See, literally these dudes have this vase on the stand and they're banging on it and rubbing on it with rocks. And over here is like a chisel with he's using probably a bronze or a copper chisel with a stone to tap it and create the surface. And you see them turning up here like they're rubbing on stone. It's all very handmade, primitive type stuff. In fact, they're making a sphinx here, they're making a standing statue here. And we've seen the result of that. We've seen that you don't get that, there's nothing that explains the really fine, polished and smooth surface of the extremely hard stone stuff. So it's a great illustration of that whole tale of two industries where, this primitive industry, the industry they were capable of and that they did a lot of, is well documented. Like all of these tools and techniques are documented. But you'll have Egyptologists and archaeologists tell you, well, this is how they made all of them, right? And then you just scale this up to 1,000 tons, no problem. Like it doesn't work that way.
Probably one of my favorite sites thus far on this trip. That's incredible. Boom! Stargate? That looks like some sort of gate though. Active archaeological site. The French, they're digging. How about it? So much fun. So much to explore. Temple, early morning, and the energy here is immaculate. These obelisks, look at these obelisks. Incredible. Harnessing energy from the ether. We did it before, and we're gonna do it again. active archaeological site right now, and there are no explanations for what these are. There's 7 of them, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But therefore,
You can see that actually there's a lot of tube drills like this where you see half the hole. They weren't chasing half a hole, obviously. But the quarriers that were recycling the stone were looking for those tube drills, because they would always then try to split the stone on the axis of the tube drill, because it's a little weaker. It's an easy, it's like a big wedge made into the stone. So they would wedge and feather the back of it and then split the stone. So you end up with these half a tube drill in a lot of places, which is kind of cool because you can see it, and there are actually striations in here. And the other thing you can see is that this is still done with the same technique as the smaller holes. Like there was a core, it's just thin, they call it a tubular drill because it's literally a tube that would cut down. And often the cores we find are tapered, right? They're tapered, they're not straight. The holes are straight, the edges of the holes are straight. The cores taper a little bit. So you have more of a gap at the top, which I think they did that deliberately so they could leave room to get a big chisel in there and then snap that granite core out of there, which is what you see. The granite, the inside, the bottom of this hole's rough from where they snap that core out. And I don't know how you snap this thing out. It's like you got to imagine it's an 8 or 9 inch bollard of granite. It's going to take a lot of force to snap that thing off, but they did. And in fact, there's a few other features here. If you can cycle through and look at it, but there's a little lip like at the edge here on the bottom side, where you can see how thin this tube drill was to cut through it. It gets down to a very fine point. Like it's not like it was a fat copper tube that was grinding. It's a very thin piece of metal or material that was cutting into that stone. And then interestingly, there's also a groove that's been cut into it, and then a notch here. And that to me, I think it seems functional, like it's probably some sort of locking mechanism where you have positions for a door that rotates. And there's something on there that goes and clunk, sort of locks it into like, all right, it's 3/4 open or it's open, like it's just a locking mechanism. But cutting that groove into this hole, when you imagine it's a complete hole, is quite a challenge. Like how do you cut this nice groove all the way around the inside, almost like a piston ring kind of thing, right? It's I don't know how they achieved that.
A lot of this temple is made out of sandstone, but a lot of the older parts are made out of granite. So this is that rose granite from the Aswan area. But this has a couple of really interesting features. This is a saw mark right here. You can see it's super thin. And you can see it starts up here and you can barely see the scratches. And it goes all the way down. And then you can see this would have been the straight line, but it veered off course a little bit, but it's super thin. Like saw blades now would be about this wide, being able to cut granite, so they had something like way thinner. And then there's another one over here that you can see. It starts here, you can see just the beginning of the little scratch here, and then it just continues, and then it's coming in at an angle down here, but that same kind of really thin blade. And then over on the other side, there's a core grate. You can see different drill holes that are perfectly round, and just removed a lot of granite. But yeah, they had some. Their version of Home Depot had a different set of power tools than we have right now.
This damage and how did it happen? This is the question. And also, I would also say, like, look how the damage is down low, and then some of the stones that are up higher are in much better quality or much better condition.
So this was buried?
It was buried.
Likely,
yeah, probably buried. Also, people can do this damage to the stuff too.
Yeah, a lot of it's been reconstructed here.
It's been reconstructed. Yeah. But it's also possible that it was something like this, and they're carving. Like, look how they carved. I would say that this was carved while this was already in this condition.
Yeah, that looks carved.
Right? So if this stone was still here, but it had already begun to fall, but it hadn't fallen off, and then they're carving these glyphs, that would weaken the whole thing, and then later it can fall off if something bumps it or scrapes it. Right?
Huge hand.
about it's many things we're talking about. You know, this statue. First of all, its material again. It's that composite quartzite that we talked about before. In fact, you can see the flint pieces in it, and this makes this material, like Yusuf calls it, a stone carver's nightmare. And if you look at the rope, I mean, all these scattered pieces from the statue, part of the upper arm, shoulder, the eye. In fact, there's probably multiple statues here, but this is the fact that this is composite quartzite. It's very difficult to work with, more difficult than granite in a lot of ways, because you hit these huge big chunks of flint. Flint here, you can see the colorations. Makes it really challenging, and to then get this finish, including over the top of flint nodules embedded in the material. You would never choose this material, and again, the material itself comes from the Red Mountain, north of Cairo. So 650 kilometers, 500-ish miles, a little less. Upriver, right? The Nile flows to the north, Cairo's to our north, so they had to bring it south upriver. And this again is of a similar scale to the Ramesseum statue, 1,000 tons I'd estimate easily. Just insane. The crystalline metamorphic part is much, much harder, and they're embedded in there in whole pieces. So you're trying to work it, and you can see this right here. Anyone, if you're looking, when you come around to the back of the statue, you'll see that this is actually part of a vein of pebbles embedded into the rock. And this all happens usually in high energy environments, like I said, in a river. So the river is moving quickly, it's pulling the quartzite out of the walls of the river, depositing it along the riverbed floor, and then over time that dries up, and over time that becomes this material. And then to pull that stuff out and be like, yeah, we can make this smooth, you know, it's really difficult. We do it now. We make quartzite countertops. But conglomerate quartzite, you know, you probably don't want to do that because it's sedimentary. It breaks too easy. And it's very difficult to work, and you can see they managed to smooth this out, but still there's these pockets and voids in the stone that are just natural. There's nothing you can do about it.
Okay, so from here, I showed you the finger, right? And then all the way here to this piece right here, as we can see. So that was all one piece. Essentially like a whole graveyard of obelisks.